if it happens to be the case that your cattle are grazing where somebody is trying to mine gold and that person has a case, whether or not
Yeah,
you can recite the Shahada might not,
it might not help your ass, man.
you know, the Lord's Prayer might not be the key determining factor whether you live or die in that. Christian genocide. So this has come up before. I mean, this isn't the first time that that discourse is rocking the airwaves in Nigeria and beyond. But I think that the discourse has a bit more force this time around, in part because it seems to be gaining more traction in the US in particular. You know, this notion that Nigeria is a place where Christians are specifically targeted for persecution, and there is enough of it that it can even be considered as genocide. It's been sort of bubbling up for some years, and I guess we should sort of talk through the history briefly. And yeah, it was seen by some people as the agenda of Boko Haram back in the period where Boko Haram was the most pressing security issue in the 2014, 2013 kind of era, the era of bring back our girls. Of course, a lot of the girls kidnapped in that harrowing incident were Christian. Um, then it seemed to have died down somewhat between then and now. Um, but it's suddenly been revived again. And I mean, one evidence of this is the recent uh, clip that's been circulating from Bill Mayer, you know, the American late night commentator, from his show where he went as far as saying that the Christian genocide in Nigeria is much more significant than what's happening in Gaza, and that American protesters who are so concerned about Gaza need to consider what's happening in Nigeria as perhaps more important. So, I mean, look, it's the astute observer of domestic issues in Nigeria and of global politics might easily wave off Bill Mayer's commentary as just a way to try to discourage pro-Palestine protest in the US. And I mean, that's totally fair. But I think that beyond Bill Mayer, I mean, the issue of Christian genocide and the calls for the US to intervene and how that enters into Nigerian political discourse and politics is probably a more important topic of conversation because of the possibility that this framing of issues might gain some further traction and, you know, result in some real world action. So that's my lengthy preamble. But I say all that to say that it would be really interesting to get you folks' take on this question of Christian genocide, why it arises at this juncture, what the evidence for it seems to be, why it fails to really account for what's happening in Nigeria in terms of insecurity or intercommunal violence. And yeah, I mean, where to from here, how to respond to it. So those are some of the questions in my mind that I think it would be interesting to tackle in this discussion. Maybe we should start with the background. May I get OG, either of you who feels the spirit lead? What do you think this whole Christian genocide thing comes from? I mean, and am I right to say that it's something that's been with us now for at least a decade, if not longer? I mean, this notion that there is a specific agenda in Nigeria to target and eliminate Christians. I mean, and are there elements of it that you think are worth taking seriously? So I guess you can come at it from whatever angle seems like a good opener. OEG, you seem to be itching to jump in. So
I just think that this thing is tied to multiple factors. You know, like again, this narrative from like European or North American countries that don't have a full understanding of what's going on in the country, and from their own bias and standpoint, coupled with pressure groups or interest groups trying to spin up a narrative, and then the climate of Palestine, Israel, all these things all merge together. Because if we look at Nigeria the way it is, it's of course bipolar with Christian and Muslim people going on. There's always been that tug, and it serves as a point where political groups or interest groups fester, or they try to sow some seed of, political tension for their own interests. So if you look at the intersection of the West, which is seen as, largely Christian, middle class men, people that like to push forward their agenda and saying that, oh, there's a war against, there's evil and good, because the whole pretext into going into what Iraq in the Middle East was the force of good versus the force of evil.
Right.
So if it sets a stage, of course, with the 9/11 ish and all that, you see presidents saying that today the Christians are good and the Muslims are evil,
Right.
blah, blah, blah. Of course, if you look behind that, there'll be interest groups, weapons contracts, all these guys are there, but what do we then do as a country to clear all these things up and to ensure that the right form of information is getting out? Because in the media age, it is who controls the narrative and the story that's going to be heard, and invasions can happen on wrong stories, or some sort of political turmoil can happen on wrong stories. That's happened once, or even numerous times.
Right.
So I feel that posturing between like global Christian versus global Muslims is just rebubbling up,
Yeah.
again in the face of this, Muslims are terrorists, Trump ascension. It has emboldened a lot of
The Christian right.
conservative Christian, yeah, the Christian right, yeah, it has emboldened them to sort of wave that conquistador sword and jump in front of things like, how knights will do, to
Right.
just say, yeah,
I
so I
mean,
feel I feel with
you say it even might be the sort of term used.
so I feel like with the insecurity in Nigeria, the northern part of Nigeria, which is right, that we can't overlook that. But how it is being framed, and the various pressure groups on ground too that want to receive aid, that want to receive money, who they are appealing to, what they are sending out, and what they are sending out in terms of the news and what's happening,
Yeah.
and what they are getting back from the like Trumpists and all. It's a lot of factors, but I'm just trying to touch
Yeah.
on various aspects of it. So of course Muslims are dying over there in record numbers. Christians are also dying there. So there's no
Right.
discrimination. Oh, that violence doesn't have like discrimination or anything. So it needs to be looked at from another perspective than this simplistic Christian genocide stuff. So mosques are blown up. People going about their day in the market are blown up. They don't ask for your religion before they shoot up the place, or throw like bombs or anything like that. So yeah, I just
Right.
feel those are those factors that come to play.
Yeah. Now it's a lot to unpack there, but yeah, good sort of lay of the land. So we'll come back to, the domestic implications in particular, but yeah, I think what you're saying about the connection between Republicans being in office and this discourse seeming to have more weight is quite interesting. Megat, do you want to jump in here as well? Like, what's your kind of knee-jerk reaction when you hear people say Nigeria is doing Christian genocide?
Yeah. Well, okay. Maybe the first thing is this Bill Maher guy? Is he Republican? I mean, ideologically. Well,
No,
Do you know?
interestingly, I think he's
Oh,
center left, so he would be more of a Clinton
mm,
Harris type person. So again, I think that it's clear that he's quite fed up with pro-Palestine protest. So
oh, okay.
the clip you'll see, he says that, oh, that why don't you focus on the real genocide, which is the genocide of Christians going on in Nigeria? And he's like, look, I'm not even a Christian, but I'm just saying that if genocide is your issue, it's this sort of whataboutism, right? Of like,
Mm,
oh, okay, you think Palestine is important. But, again, I think the discourse of Christian genocide is not something he invented. And, it's been around before him. And, it's just that he seems to have um, keyed into a moment when it was being revived.
mm. Oh, okay. I mean, I know. I mean, as most people who don't have any agenda would attest, that it's. I mean, that narrative really, is is a bit political,
Mm,
um, and I think that it began to to gain some sort of ascendancy somewhere around the Goodluck Jonathan administration.
mm.
So maybe that tallies. You're locating that time frame
Yeah,
um,
the
around the
girls.
Boko Haram Chibok girls thing. Yeah, yeah. So, but having said that, you know that that it's a bit of a push. It's a bit of yeah. Um, it's a bit extreme to frame it, as a genocide. Whatever happened in that period and what's also happened afterwards. But in saying that, you can't quite erase the fact that part of Nigeria, part of the middle belt, and you speak maybe more categorically about Plateau State, maybe Benue State, has been riven with some incessant. The nature of killings there has been incessant, and that being that these states are maybe predominantly Christian, that's been. Um, but then you have to locate it within the local context. What's giving rise to this? Why? Is it more like a farmer header clash? As it is today. In maybe Benue, is it a bit different in Plato? And I don't think that if you go at it analytically, you would come to any of such conclusions that there's a genocide against um, Christians, that's ongoing or that has, happened in Nigeria. And I think that perhaps it's also a function of how is it that you have a security architecture that allows for this or that has allowed for these
Mm,
kinds of things to
mm-hmm.
go on, for so long. And that maybe perhaps when you look at the numbers, of killings that's happened in these regions over the years, um, you'd be led to believe, or sometimes, you know, this whataboutism, can creep in because it might be shocking to find that, number of Christians who died in Nigeria, say between 2022 and 2025, has been such that if you try and compare and contrast with global figures, it's probably very staggering. And so if all you're looking at is just the numbers without,
Right.
trying to contextualize some of these things within, the local environment where they happen, then you I don't want to say you'd be excused for missing the point, but then there's the tendency for the narrative to get that kind of
Yeah,
ugly twist.
that's a good point. I mean, there is empirical data you could use to back up the argument. It's just like if you were to isolate one variable, like say gender,
Mm,
and then you're like, okay, in which countries are men dying? at the highest rates. Like Nigeria would probably still be quite high on that list. So you could almost say there's a deliberate anti-men, or there's a deliberate agenda to exterminate men in Nigeria. Like, because if you removed the number of dead people from any of the wider historical or contextual factors driving the killings, and you just focused on one identitarian element of the folks who have been killed, then it could lend itself to any kind of argument. It's a good point, I think. I mean, if I'm not misstating your point, I think it's fairly striking. Not to trivialize it, it is people's lives. But if you're like, okay, people with short hair globally, the global body count of people with short hair, I'm sure Nigeria is pretty high on that list as well.
If you say maybe scam artists, so you could say.
Hang on, now you're being unfair.
Yeah, that's true. Or you could say corrupt government official.
Yeah, although maybe Ukraine has unfortunately, I mean, because a lot of our corrupt government officials are still alive.
I know.
Yeah, right. So that's where the empirical basis of it is. There are a lot of people being killed, and I mean, we should come back to the question of why are so many people being killed of any religious background in Nigeria, which you raised. But yeah, it's true that a lot of people are being killed. I mean, I want to drill in on the point you both made, but that OEG was kind of emphasizing, which is the interest groups. So it's clear that it's in someone's interest to frame it as Christian genocide. I mean, so who do you see as the main beneficiaries or interest groups that pursue that framing? And to what extent is OAG right to point to money as one of the main motivations for that? Like, surely some of those groups are people who naively believe that that we're living through the end times, and the manifestation of that is the villages being burnt down in Shandam or Bokos or parts of Benue, right? Surely some of it is genuine. So I mean, how would you assess the proportions of like scam artists or grifters that see this discourse as a way to access funds versus the people who are actually like, no, hang on, this is a real thing? If those lines can be drawn, I mean, I'm just curious as to how you folks assess that.
But once you begin to, I mean, to analyze, societal issues, especially the negative sort, or societal ills, or some of these things that bedevil society, in this case, the Nigerian one, through the lens of religion and because once you go into this, the thing is about religion or even ethnicity. Once you go into one, you have invariably gone into the other one. So
Right.
those because I mean what you get, and there has been agitation by the people of the middle belt, where they have lampooned the security chiefs repeatedly. Some of them have, and that's where the lines between politics and what's real begin to blur because and you've had even their prominent sons go at the governments of the day, either Buhari or this current one, to say that this is deliberate. You've had state governors go as far as saying that.
Yeah.
So
with state governors, it often seems more obviously selfish to make that claim, especially when it's a Christian state governor and it's a Muslim president. Then it seems like this is obviously about the political career of that governor, right?
You should know. I mean, naturally, I think it'd be insincere.
Right.
Especially when you have an election to contest 4 years down the line. What you want to appeal to is the sentiments, the base sentiments of your people.
Right.
So, but the reason why I raise all of this is to say that in given this sort of milieu, there's no way to say that that there are not people who are cashing in on the situation, because you're dealing with emotions, yeah, right?
Yeah.
And you know, there are people who have gone as far as saying that that at this juncture, people in the middle belt, it could be statewide, it could be geopolitical, in nature, that they're obligated to defend themselves. And it then seems like just talk, right? But
Right.
you'd be shocked. You'd be shocked that there's an nexus between people who say that and some of the likes of Bill Maher, who probably our voice is, or the voice of um, radical evangelical movements in the West. Who
Okay, he's not,
come.
but yeah, there are people who are
No,
the championing.
you know, yeah, I'm just saying, generally, I'm just saying, I mean, that's why I asked the question to start with, because,
Yeah.
I watch that guy once in a while when I can. And I haven't kind of followed his own career per se.
It's because
Uh,
the guy's boring. I'm sorry to say, but yeah. I mean, it's hard to watch.
but people they laugh for the show rather than watch the show.
And because there's somebody holding up a placard saying "laugh," that's why people.
Oh, I see. Oh, Jesus Christ. I'm naive about these things. Anyways, but yeah, so that's the way I mean, once you know that there are movements like that exist in the West, and that agitations such as the ones that exist in the homestead, you can then see that you have quite uh, a gaping hole for even things like gun running.
Yeah.
So
Right.
so, that's where I'd like to leave that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oji, how do you feel about that? I mean, are there people who genuinely think this is an accurate framing of what's happening, or do you think it mainly is about cashing in?
There are some people that actually, if you speak to some people, they'll tell you that there's an agenda. Well, look at Muslim ticket or
Mm-hmm.
Christian. Why are we always on about that? Because there's a general sentiment that if you allow power to fall, solely to maybe Muslims and all, then they're going to impose Islamic, maybe not totally Sharia or Islamic doctrine and all, but it's just going to put the Christendom at a disadvantage whereby they can just do anything. Muslims can just do anything they want to do, So that gives like a big, it creates an atmosphere where maybe Christians feel they're not safe. And if you have look at things like the NGOization of just basic issues in the country, you see that there are people that cash in on that too, that just run behind like ambulance chasers. That just run behind issues,
Yeah.
and when they know there's a budget line or there are organizations out there, international organizations that might fund money towards those causes or put money towards those causes, then they become the mouthpiece of those issues whereby, okay, yeah, these people have been killed. They frame it however they want to frame it, and then they get money from these organizations. Or they want to help these widows, they want to help this, they want to help that. We need money for bus, transport, education, feeding. And the overhead cost of running your organization is even much more than the money that folks are even collecting on the ground. So it opens up an access point for misappropriation of funds, and but people will hustle however they want to hustle. It's just the framing of this thing, because once there's crisis, there's opportunity. Like never let never let a crisis go to waste.
Yeah. So I mean, you're not putting it in these terms directly, but I mean, it almost sounds like you're saying that this framing is something that is beneficial to a certain kind of professional managerial class or middle class kind of discussion, because that's who's in the NGO sector.
Yeah, I'm just drawing parallels.
Yeah.
I'm just drawing parallels with that because if wherever there's a crisis, there's an opportunity for people
Right.
to follow that pipeline and make something for themselves. So when you have a country where that atmosphere is already there, that mistrust between Christians and Muslim is there, there's violence over there, then you can't trust the narrative of the government. There's no official, like the source of information is really not the one you can trust.
Yeah.
A lot of ungoverned spaces, it gives that room for anybody to come up and say whatever it is that they want to say. Look at Radio Biafra or like all these terrorist bandwidth network or Sunday Igboho. See, anybody can just set up anything and claim that this is what is happening. But because those objective conditions that look like it or that, are sort of close to it is present, then it's easy. And if you now have people that have money to give to those funds, or if you're those kind of causes, or if you make so much noise, if you make enough noise, so you see some people that will donate to those causes. So it's seeming like it's a way. If you look on like televisions now, fine, it's not like we don't have water crisis in parts of Africa now, but the way they frame it is like nobody in Africa is drinking water. Right. So you see a lot of emotional people like, oh, let me donate £1 a day to give John a bottle of water.
Hey, by the way, if you're listening to this and you want to donate £1 a day for water, I mean, we actually have an account for that. So it's in the description of the show.
So that just it's more of the objective conditions of the country allowing for stuff like that to happen. That's where I put it. There are a lot of people that would see opportunities, with things like this to make money or bank on people's misfortunes or complex political scenarios to make their own money. Even the politicians are the number one culprits of stuff like that, So, yeah.
Okay, but look, I mean, both of you have poked a lot of holes into the Christian genocide framing. I mean, obviously, so have I. So it's clear that we don't endorse that framing here. But so a skeptical listener might ask the question, if it's not Christian genocide, then what is it? How would you explain all this violence and the fact that so many Christians are dying in it?
Is the economy stupid? It's the economy.
Right. Muslims are dying now.
Yeah, right.
People will not be Christian, will not be Muslim, they die.
Yeah. Okay.
So if we look at the people that are dying now, okay, when Christian they die, Muslim they die. It's indiscriminate. So that in itself.
But the proponents of that framing will say, yes, sometimes the genocidaires also kill their own people, but it doesn't mean their target is not Christians.
But if it's something divine that you're doing that you are sentenced by, asked by whoever you are worshiping to do, then are you not committing a sin against that? That tenet, it's a sin against it. You have to follow what it is that you are doing. We have to look for an explanation that is encompassing.
Right.
And this time, most times, it's political, economic, historical, things like that. It will give a broader and more coherent picture than just saying, it's a Christian genocide. So I feel like we need something that is past simplistic.
Yeah, right. Okay, so if you say that, for instance, like Emeka's just done that, there's an economic component to it, or that the economy is driving it primarily, then I mean, what element of the economic situation do you think is important to highlight in the explanation?
I think we've done episodes that might shed some sort of light on that. The farmer herder crisis. We have then some sort of cultural problems there, access to land, water, all these things, businesses.
Right.
Like, up north, it's livestock now with the solid minerals, all these things. There are a lot of factors that needs to be looked at and established. Who's running, these places, who's accountable, who are the genuine or real owners of the land, who, a lot of things that you need to look out for and see that, look, it's past all that. So if we, of course, we might not have a full dossier on that because we looked at just the herdsmen, instead the diminishing or shrinking of the Lake Chad, all these things. If we look at that and in all these specific places where things are happening,
Right.
grazing routes, you'll see that it follows certain logic and patterns. And anyone that is in the way of this, the crushing machinery of the people that have the power for violence will get it regardless of religion or
Right.
tribe. So that's how I, approach
Right.
it.
If it happens to be the case that your cattle are grazing where somebody is trying to mine gold and that person has a case, whether
Yeah,
you can recite the Shahada might not,
it might not help your ass, man.
the Lord's Prayer might not be the key determining factor whether you live or die in that situation.
Yeah.
Right.
So these are things like that along that line, So, and then how governments too have been honest and truthful with their people, a lot of things that needs to be examined. If you play the people and they don't benefit from anything that is going on, maybe you bring companies and they are exploiting and taking solid minerals. It's the same with crude oil. If the villagers and people feel like this development or these things that you're doing is not carrying them along, you start seeing some sort of maybe infighting, especially if the government official is from another place or is disconnected from what's happening. Then it is easily being framed like, oh, it's because he's from another religion or tribe, that's why he's doing like this. But it's just the profit motive behind stuff, So, but if you frame stuff in tribal or religious in a religious way or tribal way, it gets the people to move more because this is something that you can connect with instinctively, and it's almost like an existential threat. That, oh, just because I'm this, someone wants to eliminate me. Nah, I'd rather go and get my arms and defend myself.
I mean, if I could jump in here and say one material factor that we've alluded to, but haven't touched on directly, this issue of arms. I would say I don't know this definitively, right? But I would say that the people who are not combatants generally are not as well armed as people who are combatants. And it happens to be the case that like the militant groups at this stage profess Islam. So Boko Haram, for instance, or a lot of the bandit groups profess Islam. On the other side, in terms of the militant Christian groups, or you have the vigilante groups, right? But generally speaking, they don't seem as well armed as the Muslim groups. So you can be argued that part of the effort here in proposing this genocide label is to balance the scale of armament on both sides. And some people go as far as putting it very directly when they say, oh, the solution we propose is that you need to arm farmers. And when they say farmers, it kind of codes in Nigerian public discourse for Christian farmers. Well, so firstly, do you see what I'm doing there? Do you buy the kind of material premise that I'm laying? And then secondly, what do you think of that solution of quote unquote arming farmers? I mean, the proposed solution anyway.
Well, I don't know. I mean, because how you frame this, is going to go a long way in determining how you solve it. So
yeah,
that's why willy-nilly the frame of genocide is a useless word to me.
Yeah.
Not only because it's a pathetic lie, it's also not useful for profiling any real solutions. Especially if the solutions that you come up with would be to arm, Christian farmers, or farmers essentially.
Yeah.
Because basically you know where the problems lie. It's a mix of maybe climate change, but it's also predominantly an economic issue, which maybe in recent time, climate change has begun to feel. So, I mean, everybody knows that what the structure of the Nigerian economy is, especially with even agriculture. Um, so that this country is predominantly driven by the agricultural sector, and that even the makeup of that sector is one that is predominantly, if you like, subsistence
Right.
farming, where the methods are crude and all sorts. So we haven't managed to, and the jury is not even out on whether that's preferable way. That's how we prefer to go. At this time point. But we do know that. Oh, okay. There's not a lot of mechanized farming that's ongoing in Nigeria for any crop that you can think of.
Yeah.
But it will interest you to know that agriculture has a long history of attracting funds from the federal government, right? Of course, everyone knows that the argument is that what then is even being allocated to this sector is even insufficient. But they get something.
Yeah.
You
You
get something.
mean farming?
Sorry? Yeah, farming. Yeah, farming, essentially. Yeah.
And poultry to some extent, maybe.
And poultry, yeah. But you see, that part of pastoralism, that part of livestock, that. So if you talk about the methods of farming that are still in use in this country and say that they are outdated, especially when they even get.
No, but Megan, you're going far. So you want the government to, you want like stakeholders to invest in transforming agriculture in the country. But why do they need to do that if they can just invest in guns? Why not just?
No, but now you ask me a question on me and they try to answer you.
I get you. I'm being facetious. No, but I'm just pointing to the fact that like, so that yeah. No, let me let you.
I'm even saying if a quarter of what has even gone into agri has gone into cattle rearing, for instance. Do you understand? In terms of if we're not discussing building of ranches or the rural settlements in the mid or in 2015, 2016, if we had scaled that hurdle, some time back, before all of this animosity that makes it, even more difficult now, right? We probably wouldn't be having this conversation. So so why I say it's economic and an economic problem that has taken political dimensions is that we first need to go back to the governments in power to see what it is that they intend to do about solving the problem at its source, which is that those who rear cattle are increasingly starved of the resources that they need to rear their cattle, which means that there's been some sort of migration, a downward migration in search of shrubs, basically. Or further, yeah. And that this has then exacerbated some sort of conflict because the thing way that they chop, now the thing way people plant for their farms, right? So that's the conflict here. And then how do you solve it? At least the way to solve this is to allocate resources to the modernization of,
agriculture and pastoralism.
But you see,
or at least making cheap fodder available. I mean, because I don't even know if I trust anybody to do modernization. At least just give us grass.
Import grass. Import grass. But at least even something.
Or at least grow grass. Yeah, we don't even grow grass.
So that's why. I mean, the people who arm these guys who run the narratives it has been successive governments in Nigeria. So that's why. So that's where that's the first part of what I intend to say. Now I don't even know what I'm answering the question anymore. But once this has happened, right? What's the security architecture that you have in place to stem it? Because when you say bandits are armed, now these ones don't take them as business. Do you understand? So
Right.
then them now they tell you, so we will go conquer territory. If we conquer territory, we'll go conquer territory in such a way where we say our cattle will feed the food. Do you understand? Then farmers will want farm will now they pay us some sort of
Tax.
security and tax or security allowance, And these things are happening on the scale of local governments, right? So the question that you want to ask is, what is the police presence? Police, I'm not even going to talk military presence in these local governments. You understand? And then, so you can then see that
the police
the problem.
you're not going to pity those people.
Huh?
I said the police folks there, sir. No be you don't go pity them.
But you see, so that's why we're not even we're not even getting close to solving.
Totally.
We're not even getting, because isn't that police presence where you talk about how many them be?
Yeah.
Which ammunition they get? Do you understand? Then which kind of communication gadgets they get? Because then you find people for places where no get network, where no get.
All of them do governor house.
I mind you, a lot of these bandit groups, in contrast, are running Starlink and posting they're posting giveaway on TikTok.
And because the technology for Starlink don't allow them to do them. You understand?
But the point is that's on one side, whereas on the state side, on the security establishment, people are still, you know what I'm saying? They have the barest minimum in terms of equipment. To your point.
Because if you see the kind of money they share, I'd like to say it don't change these days. But before now, 5 you could wonder where all our 5 naira and 10 naira do that year.
Yeah.
Now bank is solar, 5 naira, 10 naira, 20 naira. And they start these things up, and then they start counting tens of millions, hundreds of millions. So and it's security tax that they collect from, so you then have a state within a state, and then the guys who claim, anyway, we now know that they negotiate with them, they settle them, they ask for amnesty. So that the bandits they give government amnesty. So it's when you think about it, you go down and say, really, it's not the narrative, that's. I mean, it's the handling of the situation that has given rise to the narrative in the first place, and that has let it fester on for years, such that once every few years we then need to knock it, as we're trying to do now. But this is not like you've said, this is not the first time that we're hearing stuff like this. But it's sickening, anyways.
So I mean, then what? So as a way to kind of conclude, you raised the point that this, you raised a number of points, very very helpful points actually, in clarifying at least one of the dimensions of the conflict as it relates to banditry, which of course OG has pointed out we've talked about previously, but unfortunately it's an issue that's still very relevant. But you've also said that it appears like the basis of the Christian genocide narrative will remain with us for some time unless the fundamentals are addressed. So where do you see this all going? Because it doesn't appear like the fundamentals are going to be addressed anytime soon. And at least I've not gotten that indication looking at the policy discussion. And it does seem like the Christian genocide narrative is ramping up to some extent. I mean, not to the scale of a kind of like pre-Iraq war situation. Of course, the discourse there wasn't strictly about Christian versus Muslim. There was also this conversation about weapons of mass destruction as a direct threat to the West. So the basis for intervention was probably stronger. But I mean, do you fear the possibility of like intervention in some way, or like what's the worst case scenario? I guess I ask this because some of the folks who push the Christian genocide narrative might say, well, look, even if it's not strictly genocide, isn't it better to make more noise so that something happens? So, I mean, I guess the question I'm posing to you folks, and as perhaps as a way of getting you to respond to that, to that rationale is, okay, then what's the risk, or what's likely to happen if that narrative continues to grow?
It's just going to spiral into much more of, misinformation, and where maybe it'll catch the political elites' ears, and they might have to come out and defend, or like clarify things if it's getting to proportions where there's external, maybe like UN, pressure from US or European community and all, because it's until it starts hurting pockets like sanctions, stuff like that, because they've let these things run, wild. That's when I feel the Nigerian elite will come out and say something, because there's been accusations here and there about different things, about corruption, but it's not until you get stuff like blocking of your loans, aid,
right,
and all, before they can come out and clarify or clear the air. But unfortunately, when it gets to that time, a lot of misinformation will have seeped into people's minds, and they'll hold it, and it will further enshrine that lack of trust in government. So that's if they let it play out for that long.
right, yeah. Yeah, Maggie, what's your take on this? As in, like, what's the risk? So what if the narrative continues? Maybe it will get attention. Then maybe attention is what's needed here.
The risk, if you ask me, is frightening if it gets to a head, because I mean, if you keep feeling that narrative, and then the more that you keep doing that, the more it's being bought into. The more that you then move from vigilantes to militant groups.
Right.
Within farming communities.
Okay. We might get our own Lord's Resistance Army or some kind of Christian.
So I mean, so that's the tendency.
Yeah.
And that the only way to do this is the only way to nip this in the bud is to get serious, to start prioritizing some of the problems that cattle headers face to start with. I'm not saying that the genuine challenges that they face hasn't been what's the word now?
Acknowledged.
No, it's not been acknowledged. I mean that people haven't harped on it. Bandits. I'm trying to link how bandits have then harped on that to perpetrate.
Okay, like it's been weaponized, right?
Yeah, that's like being weaponized. That's the word. So it's because I mean, you can't imagine a country that has this kind of problem.
Yeah.
And then a new government comes into town, and then they budget 15 trillion or how many trillion to build, a coastal highway.
Yeah.
And then these are challenges that are there on the table. I know that some months back, maybe even a year ago, that something about appointment of Jega as something committee or minister wanting livestock.
Yeah. No, there was a national livestock conference, and then there's a new ministry of livestock as well. And
so
Jega was part of the conference, but they've appointed the minister of livestock, somebody other than Jega.
Oh, okay. So you see, so these are the things. I mean, you just did the conference, they appoint, they create. Then the funds where you allocate to there, you allocate them to 700-kilometer road.
And you know what you also do? You allocate the funds to big time ranchers. So, for instance, the guy who was appointed as Minister of Livestock, he runs Big Ranch, which is good. I mean, I'm happy for him, but I just don't see how that has anything to do with the guys who are outside of fences fighting over marginal lands. on contending with banditry.
Because you get expertise in ranching, so they won't build ranch. You know? But allocate. I mean, if that's where you want to even go, if that's the route you want to go that. But make with this because it's a problem. It's so rather than do that a year ago or maybe 6 months ago, they've now found themselves in a situation where they are running to Benue State, Plateau State for burial ceremony of one party man, and using that, desecrating that platform to politic about Christian churches. I mean, like that's the avenue for that kind of thing. So you see that they know what they're doing, right? But also that once they go and speak one big English there, tell Christian Northerners that their wives are pastors and pastoralists, they'll be you. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean it boggles the mind, and it can definitely also trip up the tongue trying to pass the level of idiocy and also of ingenuity that is a part of this dynamic. We've done our best to try to make some sense of it today, at least the element that pertains to this discourse of Christian genocide. But I'm sure there's elements of the discussion that we've missed. So if there are things that you want to chime in, areas of our own discussion that you feel need to be corrected or critiqued, definitely feel free to send a message to Emeka, but not to me and not to AG. Because Emeka is the one who fields the critical comments on behalf of the rest of us. So yeah, please flood his inbox with your responses. I mean, I joke. Yeah, feel free to comment on the show or let us know what you think about this discussion. Folks, that being said, should we park it there for today?
Yep.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Oye, you need to go and soak curry.